You want me to what? Captain James Harper stared at the blue-skinned alien across the recruitment desk, certain he'd misheard the translated request. To verify your combat proficiency through your kill count certification, repeated Admiral Trell, his 6 eyes blinking in perfect sequence. It's standard procedure for all military personnel joining the Galactic Unified Forces. James scratched his stubbled chin. Look, I don't know how you folks do things out here, but on Earth we don't exactly keep a running tally. The Admiral's translator chip emitted a sound suspiciously like a scoff. Every civilized species maintains accurate combat statistics. How else would one determine battlefield effectiveness or calculate proper compensation? Compensation? James raised an eyebrow. You pay bonuses based on kills? Of course. The Admiral tapped his datapad impatiently. The Unified Forces Engagement Protocol mandates performance-based incentives. Achievement bonuses account for approximately 38.7% of a warrior's total compensation package. James fought to keep his expression neutral. 6 months ago, he'd been eating freeze-dried rations in a bunker outside New Detroit, fighting in humanity's seemingly endless civil war. Now, thanks to First Contact and humanity's desperate bid for galactic recognition, he was being interviewed to join what amounted to the universe's most bureaucratic military organization. Look, James leaned forward. I've been a soldier for 15 years. I've served in 7 major conflicts. I was a captain in Earth's Combined Defense Forces. Isn't that enough? The Admiral's skin darkened slightly, the Trell equivalent of a frown. Without verified combat metrics, we cannot properly assess your value. Perhaps you could provide an estimate. James sighed. Earth had only recently joined the galactic community, and the position he was applying for was critical to humanity's standing. Being one of the first humans accepted into the Galactic Unified Forces carried the weight of his entire species' reputation. Fine, if you need a number. James paused, mentally tallying various engagements. I'd estimate somewhere around 200. The silence that followed was so profound that James could hear the soft hum of the station's environmental systems. All 6 of Admiral Trell's eyes widened to perfect circles, and his blue skin paled to a sickly periwinkle. 200. The Admiral's voice emerged as barely more than a whisper. You personally have ended 200 sentient lives? James shifted uncomfortably. Give or take. Like I said, we don't keep exact count. The Admiral's hands trembled slightly as he made a notation on his datapad. I see. And this is typical for a human warrior of your rank? Below average, actually, James replied with a casual shrug. Some of our Special Forces operators have double that. Triple even. Admiral Trell looked like he might faint. I must consult with the Security Council. Please wait here. As the Admiral hurried from the room, James noticed he'd left his datapad behind. Curious, he picked it up and tapped the screen. A list of the top combat officers in the Galactic Unified Forces appeared, complete with their lifetime kill counts. Grand Marshal Kavoth, Supreme Commander of the Unified Forces, 17 Admiral Trell, Fleet Commander, 8 General Threx, Ground Force Commander, 12. James blinked. Well, shit. Absolutely unprecedented. Admiral Trell paced the length of the Security Council chamber, his uniform rippling with agitation. We knew humans were from a Class 4 death world, but their combat statistics are beyond comprehension. High Counselor Vorr'Nak, an elegant silver-skinned being with feathery appendages, leaned forward. Perhaps there's a translation error? Or their definition of kill differs from galactic standard? I considered that, the Admiral replied. So I clarified with direct questions. The Humans 200 refers specifically to confirmed enemy combatant eliminations performed personally, not by command or proxy. He paused dramatically, and he considers this number below average. The council chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. We cannot possibly admit such a species into the Unified Forces, declared General Threx, a reptilian being covered in ornate battle scars that belied his actual combat experience. They're clearly too violent, too dangerous. Yet we need them, countered Counselor Drex, a hive mind representative who spoke with a disconcerting chorus of voices. The Krell incursions at the Outer Rim grow more aggressive by the cycle. Our conventional tactics have proven ineffective. The Krell have destroyed 14 colonies in the past standard year, added Science Director Chin, her translucent body pulsing with concerned bioluminescence. Our projections indicate they will reach core systems within 5 years unless contained. High Counselor Vorr'Nak's feathers rippled in thought. What do we know of human combat psychology? Are they mindless killers, or is there method to their efficiency. Their historical records show complex ethical frameworks around warfare, Science Director Chin replied. They possess concepts like proportional response and rules of engagement, though they appear to honor these selectively. How reassuring, General Threx said dryly. I propose a compromise, Vorr'Nak announced after a moment. We accept this human. Madness, interrupted General Threx. But we assign him to a specialized role, Vorr'Nak continued firmly. One where his particular talents can be monitored and directed appropriately. The council chamber fell silent as they considered the proposal. And, added Vorr'Nak, we insist on a full psychological evaluation. If there's even a hint that he might pose a danger to Allied forces, we terminate the arrangement immediately. Admiral Trell's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep contemplation. What specialized role did you have in mind? High Counselor Vorr'Nak's expression shifted to what passed for a smile in her species. I believe I have the perfect assignment. Combat Instructor? James repeated, staring at the official appointment displayed on the holographic projector. I thought I was being recruited as a field operative. Admiral Trell's translator chip seemed to struggle with his nervous tone. The Security Council believes your extensive experience would be better utilized in training our elite forces. You would be stationed at the Galactic Military Academy on Nexus Prime, preparing our finest cadets for actual combat scenarios. James narrowed his eyes. This is because of the kill count thing, isn't it? Not at all. The Admiral's skin flushed a deep indigo, the Trell equivalent of a blush. Well, perhaps tangentially. Your combat proficiency metrics exceed our standard parameters for field operatives. You mean I've killed too many people to be trusted in combat? James translated flatly. The Admiral's 6 eyes blinked rapidly. Your directness is refreshing. Most species would employ at least 7 layers of euphemism for such a conversation. James sighed. Admiral, I understand your concerns, but if you want humans to join your alliance, you need to understand something about us. We don't fight because we enjoy it. We fight because sometimes it's necessary. Is it necessary 200 times? The question slipped out before the Admiral could stop himself. When the alternative is letting your people die? Yes. James met the alien's gaze steadily. Every sentient I've killed was trying to kill me, my squad, or innocent civilians. I don't regret protecting them, but I don't celebrate the deaths either. Admiral Trell studied the human carefully. You've given me something to consider, Captain Harper. Nevertheless, the Security Council's decision stands. Combat Instructor at Nexus Prime. James nodded slowly. All right, when do I start? Immediately, replied the Admiral. Your transport leaves in 3 hours. Oh, and there's one more condition. You'll be required to undergo regular psychological evaluations with Dr. Ell'Vira, our chief xenopsychologist. You're afraid I'm going to snap and murder everyone, James said bluntly. Admiral Trell's skin paled again. We prefer the term ensuring optimal integration of diverse species-specific combat psychologies. 7 layers of euphemism, huh? James grinned despite himself. Fine, I'll go teach your cadets, and I'll talk to your shrink. But in return, I want something. What might that be? The Admiral asked cautiously. I want to understand what we're really fighting against. These Krell that have you so desperate you're recruiting the most violent species you've ever encountered. The Admiral hesitated, then nodded. That can be arranged. Report to Briefing Room 7 in 1 hour. And Captain Harper? Yes, Admiral? Welcome to the Galactic Unified Forces. The Nexus Prime Military Academy resembled a massive crystal palace more than any military facility James had ever seen. Its gleaming spires and transparent walkways reflected the blue-green light of the nearby gas giant, creating an almost ethereal glow throughout the complex. Beautiful, isn't it? Asked his escort, a 4-armed feline-like being who had introduced herself as Lieutenant Terri. The academy was designed to harmonize with the natural energy patterns of this sector. It's not exactly what I'd expect for a military training facility, James admitted, noticing the distinct lack of anything remotely resembling fortifications. Lieutenant Terri's whiskers twitched in amusement. What would you expect, Captain Harper? Bunkers, defensive positions, maybe a wall or two? James gestured at the completely exposed crystal structures. This place would last about 5 minutes in an actual attack. The Academy is protected by the most advanced shield technology in the galaxy, Terri explained. The physical structure is merely an aesthetic choice, one that reflects the Unified Forces' commitment to transparency and beauty even in martial pursuits. James bit back a comment about the practicality of beautiful military installations. I see. And where will I be conducting my training sessions? The combat simulation chamber is this way, Terri replied, leading him down a crystalline walkway that seemed to float above an artificial lake filled with luminescent creatures. Your first class begins in approximately 1 standard hour. The cadets are most eager to meet you. I bet they are, James muttered, remembering his briefing on the Krell threat. The insectoid species had appeared at the edge of known space 3 years ago, destroying everything in their path with terrifying efficiency. Unlike most galactic civilizations, which had evolved beyond large-scale warfare millennia ago, the Krell seemed purpose-built for conquest. Their hive mind coordination and biological weapons had overwhelmed the unified forces' elegant but untested defensive systems. The briefing had made one thing abundantly clear. The peaceful galactic community had forgotten how to fight a real war. They had the technology but lacked the mindset, the ruthlessness, the will to do what was necessary. They needed humans. Here we are, announced Terri, stopping before a doorway that shimmered like water. The combat simulation chamber. It can recreate any battlefield environment with 99.8% accuracy, including sensory feedback. Impressive, James nodded. And my students? 30 of our finest cadets representing 17 different species. Terri's chest puffed with pride. All top graduates of their planetary academies, selected specifically for this advanced combat training program. Right. James took a deep breath. Let's meet them. As they passed through the shimmering doorway, James found himself in what appeared to be a vast, empty white space. Arranged in a perfect semicircle before him stood 30 beings of wildly varying shapes, sizes, and physiologies. Some had multiple limbs, others none at all. Some floated, while others stood firmly on various appendages. All wore the pristine white uniforms of the Galactic Unified Forces Academy, and all were staring at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed horror. "Cadets, attention!" called Lieutenant Terri. "I present Captain James Harper of Earth, your new advanced combat tactics instructor." Perfect stillness greeted this announcement. James could practically feel their eyes cataloging his every feature, from his relatively dense musculature to his predatory forward-facing eyes. "Thank you, Lieutenant." James nodded to Terri before turning to address the cadets. "At ease, everyone. I know what you're thinking. Yes, I'm from that primitive death world that just joined the Alliance. And yes, the rumors about human combat statistics are probably true." A ripple of unease passed through the assembled cadets. "But I'm not here to turn you into killers," James continued. "I'm here to make sure you survive. Because from what I understand about the Krell, survival is going to require a different approach than what you've been taught so far." One cadet, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin, raised a delicate appendage. "Instructor, is it accurate that you have personally terminated over 200 sentient beings?" James suppressed a sigh. Word traveled fast, even in interstellar bureaucracies. "Yes," he answered simply, "in defense of my people and myself." The cadets exchanged glances, their various communication methods, blinking, color-changing, subtle movements, creating a symphony of unspoken conversation. "That's more than our entire graduating class combined," observed another cadet, this one a bulky, rock-like entity. "Which is exactly why I'm here," James replied evenly. "The unified forces recognize that they're facing an enemy with capabilities beyond their experience. My job is to bridge that gap." "By teaching us to kill?" asked a small, multi-eyed creature near the front. "By teaching you to survive," James corrected. "And yes, sometimes survival means eliminating threats. But more importantly, it means understanding when and how to fight effectively." He turned to Lieutenant Terri. "Can this simulation chamber create a Krell attack scenario?" Terri's fur rippled with concern. "It can, but Krell simulations are typically reserved for final year training. These cadets have not yet— They need to see what they're really up against," James interrupted. "Not the sanitized version in your textbooks." After a moment's hesitation, Terri nodded and spoke a command in her native language. The white space around them shimmered, then transformed into a colony world under attack. The simulation was so realistic that James instinctively reached for a weapon that wasn't there. Buildings burned around them as swarms of Krell warriors, each the size of a small car, with razor-sharp appendages and chitinous armor, tore through defensive positions with frightening efficiency. The colonists, mostly civilian, ran in panic while a small detachment of Unified Forces troops attempted a textbook defensive formation. They were being slaughtered. "This," James said quietly as the cadets watched in horror, "is what happened on New Centauri last year." Standard Unified Forces defensive protocols were followed to the letter. 87% casualties in under 30 minutes. He let the simulation run for another moment before ordering, "Freeze program." The nightmarish scene froze in mid-carnage. "This is what we're up against," James continued, walking through the frozen tableau. "The Krell don't fight for honor or territory or resources. They fight to eradicate. They don't take prisoners, they don't negotiate, and they don't retreat." He stopped beside the frozen image of a Unified Forces officer, her elegant uniform torn and stained as she tried to shield a civilian child from an attacking Krell. "Your traditional combat doctrine emphasizes minimal force, defensive positioning, and strategic withdrawal when casualties reach 5%. James looked around at the stunned faces of his students. "Against the Krell, that's a death sentence." "What alternative do you propose, Instructor?" asked the rock-like cadet, their voice surprisingly gentle. James met their gaze steadily. "I propose we learn from human military history, not because we're inherently better warriors, but because we've made every possible mistake already. We've learned, through centuries of bloodshed, what works and what doesn't when facing an existential threat." He turned to Terri. "End simulation." As the horrific scene dissolved back into empty whiteness, James addressed his students again. "I don't expect any of you to match my kill count. In fact, I hope none of you ever have to. But I do expect you to set aside your preconceptions about civilized warfare. The Krell don't care about your ethical guidelines or your beautiful formations. They care about wiping you out of existence." The cadets were silent, processing his words. "Tomorrow," James continued, "we begin actual training. I suggest you all get a good night's rest. It's going to be challenging in ways you haven't experienced before." As the cadets filed out, James noticed one remaining behind, the willowy, iridescent being who had asked about his kill count. "Something on your mind, cadet?" "Trill'Ax," they supplied. "And yes, Instructor, I wish to ask, does it trouble you, the killing?" James considered the question carefully. "Every death should trouble a thinking being, Trill'Ax. The day it stops bothering you is the day you become something dangerous. Yet you've continued despite this trouble." "Because the alternative was worse," James replied simply. "Sometimes there are no good choices in war, only less terrible ones." Trill'Ax seemed to absorb this, their skin shifting through patterns of deep blue and purple. "I see. Thank you for your honesty, Instructor." As the cadet left, Lieutenant Terri approached. "That was unconventional, Captain Harper." "So I've been told," James sighed. "Let me guess. I've violated at least a dozen Academy protocols?" 17, actually," Terri replied, her whiskers twitching with what might have been amusement. "But Admiral Trell gave you operational discretion in your teaching methods." "Smart man. The Admiral has 8 eyes, Captain." Figure of speech. James rubbed his temples. "Look, I know my approach is jarring for your people, but these cadets need to understand what they're facing. The Krell won't politely observe galactic combat conventions." Terri's expression grew serious. "I lost my clutch sister on New Centauri, Captain Harper. I understand the threat better than most." James winced. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "How could you?" She gestured for him to follow her out of the chamber. "But it's why, despite my reservations about your methods, I'm willing to give them a chance. These cadets deserve the truth, however uncomfortable." As they walked back through the crystalline corridors, James felt the weight of his new responsibilities settle on his shoulders. These weren't hardened human soldiers, accustomed to the brutal realities of combat. They were the brightest minds of a peaceful civilization, thrust into a war they were fundamentally unprepared for, and he was supposed to prepare them without breaking them. "One more thing, Captain," Terri said as they reached his quarters. "Your first appointment with Dr. Ell'Vira is scheduled for tomorrow after your training session." "Right, the psychological evaluation." James nodded. "Looking forward to it." Terri's translator must have missed his sarcasm because she replied cheerfully, "Excellent. Many find their sessions with Dr. Ell'Vira quite enlightening." As the lieutenant left, James surveyed his new quarters, spacious, elegantly appointed, and entirely too fragile-looking for his comfort. Even the furniture seemed designed more for aesthetic appreciation than functional use. "Computer!" he called out, hoping the universal translator would work with the station's systems. A soft chime acknowledged his call. "Is there a way to adjust the environmental settings in these quarters? Maybe something a bit more Earth-like?" "Customization options are available," replied a melodious voice. Would you prefer to simulate a specific Earth habitat? James thought for a moment. How about a standard military barracks, North American region? Processing request, the computer replied. After a brief pause, the room's appearance shifted subtly. The ambient lighting darkened, the temperature dropped a few degrees, and the overly elaborate furniture was replaced with simpler, more utilitarian pieces. Better, James nodded, dropping onto the now sturdy bed. Much better. As he lay back, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, he wondered if he'd made the right choice accepting this assignment. Teaching aliens how to fight like humans seemed straightforward enough, but the cultural gap was wider than he'd anticipated. Their entire conception of warfare was fundamentally different, almost naively idealistic. And then there was the kill count issue. 200 had seemed almost modest from a human military perspective. Among his peers it wasn't particularly remarkable, but here it made him something between a monster and a marvel. How could he possibly bridge that gap? With that troubling thought, James closed his eyes, hoping sleep would come despite the strange sounds and smells of an alien world. Fascinating, murmured Dr. Ell'Vira, her translucent tentacles rippling as she made notes on her datapad. So you're saying that human children engage in simulated combat as recreation? James sighed. They were 30 minutes into his psychological evaluation, and the xenopsychologist seemed more interested in human culture than his mental state. We call it playing, he explained for what felt like the 10th time. Kids pretending to be soldiers or playing sports isn't the same as actual combat training. Yet these activities normalize conflict resolution through physical dominance, Dr. Ell'Vira observed, her large faceted eyes blinking in sequence. Quite different from Zalarian younglings, who resolve disputes through cooperative problem-solving puzzles. Look, Doctor. James leaned forward in his chair, which was clearly not designed for human anatomy. I thought this session was supposed to determine if I'm a homicidal maniac who's going to murder your cadets. Dr. Ell'Vira's skin flushed a pale pink. Embarrassment, perhaps? That characterization is overly dramatic, Captain Harper. We're simply establishing baseline parameters for cross-species psychological compatibility. In other words, making sure I'm not too human for your comfort. The doctor's tentacles stilled. Your directness is refreshing, if somewhat jarring. Most species would employ at least 7 layers of euphemism, I know, James finished. Admiral Trell mentioned that too. Did he? Dr. Ell'Vira seemed pleased. The Admiral rarely engages in metacultural observations. You must have made quite an impression. I think terrified is more accurate than impressed, James replied dryly. Dr. Ell'Vira made another note. Captain Harper, may I ask a more direct question? Please do. Does it concern you that your combat record is considered extreme even by galactic standards? James considered the question carefully. Honestly, no. Different circumstances produce different results. Earth has been shaped by conflict in ways that most galactic societies haven't experienced for millennia. We've had to become efficient at warfare to survive. And this efficiency doesn't trouble you morally? That's 2 different questions, James pointed out. Am I troubled by the necessity of becoming good at killing? Yes, frequently. Am I troubled by the fact that I've killed to protect others? No. Dr. Ell'Vira's tentacles rippled thoughtfully. An interesting distinction. Many species would categorize all violence as equally problematic, regardless of intent. And how's that working out against the Krell? James asked pointedly. The doctor's skin darkened slightly. A fair observation. Our peaceful approach to interspecies relations has indeed left us underprepared for an enemy that doesn't share our values. Which is why I'm here, James concluded. Not because humans are naturally bloodthirsty, but because we haven't had the luxury of forgetting how to fight. A luxury, repeated Dr. Ell'Vira, making another note. Most would consider peace a fundamental right, not a luxury. Peace is the goal, James agreed, but sometimes you have to fight for it. The doctor studied him for a long moment. You are not what I expected, Captain Harper. Is that a professional assessment, Doctor? A sound emerged from the translator that might have been a laugh. Hardly, but I believe our session time has elapsed, and I have sufficient data for my initial report. And, James prompted, am I cleared to continue training your cadets? Dr. Ell'Vira's tentacles performed an elaborate gesture that his translator didn't bother to interpret. You present no immediate psychological concerns that would contraindicate your teaching assignment. However, I would recommend continued regular sessions to monitor for signs of stress or cultural dissonance. In other words, I'm sane enough for now, but you'll be keeping an eye on me. 7 layers of euphemism, Dr. Ell'Vira replied, with what might have been a smile. 3 weeks into his training program, James stood in the observation deck overlooking the combat simulation chamber, watching his cadets run through a tactical exercise. Below, the 30 students worked in 5-member teams to secure objectives in a simulated Krell-occupied colony. "They're improving," noted Lieutenant Terri, who had become something of a liaison between James and the Academy administration. "They are," James agreed, watching as Trill'Ax's team executed a perfect flanking maneuver against a simulated Krell patrol. Faster response times, better coordination, less hesitation. Yet their combat effectiveness metrics remain significantly below optimal parameters, observed another voice. James turned to see Admiral Trell approaching, his 6 eyes focused on the training below. "Admiral?" James nodded in greeting. "I didn't realize you'd be observing today." "The Security Council is most interested in your progress, Captain Harper," replied the Admiral, "especially given your unconventional training methods." James had indeed departed from standard Academy protocols. Rather than following the meticulously designed training progression that had been used for centuries, he'd implemented a crash course in human-style combat tactics, emphasizing adaptability, aggression when necessary, and above all, survival. "My methods may be unconventional by your standards, Admiral, but they're producing results." James gestured toward the simulation. "Watch Trill'Ax's team. 3 weeks ago, they would have retreated at the first sign of resistance. Now they're actively engaging and neutralizing threats." "Neutralizing," repeated the Admiral, his skin darkening slightly. "A curious euphemism from a species that typically eschews them." James shrugged. "Old habits, but yes, they're killing the enemy when necessary." "And their psychological evaluations?" The Admiral directed this question to Lieutenant Terri. "Stable, sir," she replied. "Dr. Ell'Vira reports elevated stress levels, but within acceptable parameters for combat training. No indications of psychological trauma or moral distress." The Admiral's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. Surprising, given the intensity of the simulations. "Not really," James interjected. "Your people aren't inherently less capable of handling combat stress. They've just been conditioned to avoid it. With proper training and support, they're adapting well." Below, a simulated explosion rocked one of the teams, sending them scrambling for cover. James watched intently as they regrouped, communicated, and executed a tactical withdrawal while maintaining suppressive fire, exactly as he'd taught them. "Your assessment of their combat readiness?" asked the Admiral. James considered the question carefully. "They're not ready for actual deployment yet. They've mastered the basics, but they need more scenario training, more repetition until these responses become instinctual. In a real combat situation, you don't have time to think through every decision. Yet in 3 weeks, you've achieved what our standard training program requires 3 months to accomplish," the Admiral observed. "Because I'm not teaching them to be perfect," James explained. "I'm teaching them to be effective. Perfect form doesn't matter if you're dead." The Admiral made a gesture that James had come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. "The Security Council will be pleased with this progress. However, there is another matter we must discuss." James raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "The Krell have accelerated their offensive. 3 more border colonies have fallen in the past week, and our intelligence suggests they're preparing for a major push toward the inner systems." James felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "These cadets aren't ready for deployment, Admiral." "Perhaps not," agreed Trell. "But you are." "Me?" James frowned. "I thought my assignment was as an instructor." "Circumstances change, Captain Harper. The Unified Forces High Command has authorized the formation of a Special Operations Unit to counter Krell advance forces. Your experience makes you uniquely qualified to lead such a unit." "And my students?" James gestured to the cadets below, who were now completing their simulation exercise. "Would continue their training under Lieutenant Terri, following your established curriculum," the Admiral replied. Unless what?" Admiral Trell's 6 eyes fixed on James with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Unless you believe some of them might be ready to join this Special Operations Unit. Under your command, of course." James stared at the Admiral in disbelief. "You want me to take these cadets, who 3 weeks ago had never seen actual combat, into a real war zone?" "Only those you deem ready," clarified the Admiral, "and accompanied by veteran Unified Forces operators." "This is insane." James shook his head. "They need at least another month of intensive training before I'd consider them field ready." "We don't have a month, Captain Harper." The Admiral's voice hardened. "The Krell advance must be contained now, or we risk losing the entire Vega sector." James looked back down at his students. They had indeed made remarkable progress. Some, like Trill'Ax, showed natural tactical aptitude that rivaled seasoned human operators. Others had overcome their initial hesitation and demonstrated genuine combat potential. But potential wasn't enough against the Krell. "Give me 1 week," James said finally. 1 week of intensive, round-the-clock training. Then I'll select a team from the volunteers, if any are willing to go. The Admiral's skin lightened with relief. "Acceptable. The operation launches in 8 standard days. I'll have the mission parameters transmitted to your secure terminal." As the Admiral departed, Lieutenant Tipper moved closer to James. "You don't believe they're ready?" It wasn't a question. "No," James admitted. "But they're closer than anyone else in this academy, and the Admiral's right. We're running out of time." Tipper's fur rippled with concern. "Will you tell them about the deployment option?" James watched as his cadets exited the simulation chamber below, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and accomplishment. They had worked harder these past weeks than most had in their entire academic careers. Yes, he decided. They deserve to know what they're training for, and they deserve the choice. The announcement had gone exactly as James expected. Initial shock, followed by a flurry of questions, followed by an uneasy silence as the reality sank in. He had been brutally honest about the risks. This wasn't a training exercise or a peacekeeping mission. It was combat against the most lethal enemy the unified forces had ever encountered. Now, 12 hours later, he sat in his quarters reviewing the list of volunteers. 23 names out of 30. Far more than he had anticipated. Far more than he wanted to risk. A soft chime announced a visitor at his door. "Enter," he called. The door slid open to reveal Dr. Ell'Vira, her translucent form backlit by the corridor lights. "Doctor?" James nodded in greeting. "If you're here for our scheduled session, I'm afraid I'll have to reschedule. I'm in the middle of some critical—" "I'm not here for our session, Captain Harper," interrupted the doctor, gliding into the room with fluid grace. "I'm here about your volunteers." James set down his datapad. "What about them?" "I've reviewed their psychological profiles." Dr. Ell'Vira's tentacles moved in patterns that seemed to indicate concern. "Many are volunteering from a sense of obligation rather than readiness." "I'm aware," James sighed. "That's why I'm only selecting 5. 5? The doctor's skin pulsed with surprise. "Admiral Trell indicated you would be assembling a larger team." "The Admiral can indicate whatever he wants," James replied firmly. "I'm not taking cadets into combat unless I'm absolutely certain they can handle it. 5 is my limit." Dr. Ell'Vira studied him for a moment. "You care about them." "Of course I care about them," James said, irritation creeping into his voice. "They're my responsibility, my students." "Many instructors would see this as an opportunity for glory," the doctor observed. "A chance to demonstrate the effectiveness of their training program." "Then many instructors shouldn't be teaching combat tactics," James retorted. "This isn't about glory or proving a point. It's about stopping the Krell with minimal casualties on our side," James said. "These aren't just statistics on a datapad. These are people I've trained, people who trust me to keep them alive." Dr. Ell'Vira's tentacles rippled in a pattern that his translator interpreted as approval. "Your empathy is unexpected, given your combat record." "Why?" James asked bluntly. "Because I've killed hundreds. You assume I don't value life?" "The correlation is not illogical," the doctor replied carefully. "Maybe by your standards." James stood, pacing the small room. "But humans learned long ago that the best warriors aren't mindless killers. They're protectors. They fight fiercely precisely because they value what they're defending." He gestured to the datapad. "That's why I'm only taking 5. Because the others aren't ready, and I won't sacrifice them to prove a point or meet some arbitrary deployment quota." Dr. Ell'Vira was silent for a moment, her skin shifting through patterns of color that the translator didn't attempt to interpret. Finally, she asked, "Which 5? James handed her the datapad. "Trill'Ax, Vorr'Nak, Kaleth, Zenzi, and Drel. They've shown the best combination of tactical thinking, emotional resilience, and combat aptitude." The doctor examined the list, her tentacles moving in a pattern James had come to recognize as deep contemplation. "An interesting selection. Not the 5 with the highest combat scores." "Combat isn't just about scores," James pointed out. "It's about instinct, adaptability, and teamwork. These 5 work well together, and each brings something unique to the mission." "I see." Dr. Ell'Vira returned the datapad. "I will prepare their final psychological evaluations immediately. The Admiral will require them before mission approval." "Thank you, Doctor." As Dr. Ell'Vira turned to leave, She paused at the door. Captain Harper, there is one more thing I feel compelled to ask. Go ahead. Your own psychological profile indicates elevated stress markers. Are you certain you are prepared for this mission? James smiled grimly. Doctor, I've been prepared for missions like this my entire career. The question isn't whether I'm ready. It's whether I can get those 5 cadets ready in time. A responsibility you take quite seriously, observed the doctor. More than anything, James agreed. Because unlike me, they haven't spent their lives preparing for this. They've had 3 weeks. Dr. Ell'Vira's skin pulsed with what might have been concern. I believe they have had an excellent teacher. Good luck, Captain Harper. After the doctor left, James returned to his mission preparations, reviewing the intelligence reports on Krell movements near Outpost Sigma-7, their designated target. The reports painted a grim picture. The insectoid species had established a forward operating base on a small moon, apparently preparing for a major push into the adjacent star system. The mission was simple in concept, but dauntingly complex in execution. Infiltrate the base, gather intelligence on Krell battle plans, and if possible, sabotage their communications array to disrupt their attack coordination. A small team had the best chance of slipping past their defenses undetected. A soft chime from his terminal indicated an incoming message. James activated the screen to find Trill'Ax's iridescent face looking back at him. Instructor, they greeted him formally. I've been informed of your selection for the Special Operations Unit. That's correct. James nodded. You've demonstrated exceptional aptitude, Trill'Ax. The cadet's skin shifted through patterns of blue and purple. Uncertainty, James had learned. May I speak freely, Instructor? Always. I am concerned about my readiness. 3 weeks ago, I had never even experienced a combat simulation. Now I am to face actual Krell. James appreciated the cadet's honesty. Your concern is valid. If you wish to withdraw, there would be no shame. No! Trill'Ax interrupted, their skin flushing a deep crimson. Determination. I do not wish to withdraw. I merely seek reassurance that I will not endanger the mission through inexperience. Let me be clear. James leaned closer to the screen. I wouldn't have selected you if I didn't believe you were ready. Your tactical instincts are among the best I've seen, and your species' natural camouflage abilities will be invaluable for recon. The cadet's skin lightened slightly. And the combat aspects? You've proven you can make the hard choices when necessary, James said carefully, knowing what Trill'Ax was really asking. But remember, this is primarily an intelligence mission. Combat is our last resort. I understand, Instructor. Trill'Ax's skin settled into a steady blue pattern. Acceptance. I will not disappoint you. I know you won't, James replied with more confidence than he felt. Get some rest. Intensive training begins at 600 tomorrow. After ending the call, James leaned back in his chair, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He was about to lead 5 inexperienced cadets into one of the most dangerous missions imaginable. If he'd miscalculated their readiness, or his ability to prepare them, the consequences would be fatal. But there was no alternative. The Krell advance had to be stopped, and conventional tactics had proven ineffective. They needed intelligence, and they needed it now. James only hoped that the price wouldn't be too high. The Special Operations Training Facility made the Academy look like a luxury resort. Located in a reinforced bunker beneath Nexus Prime's northern continent, it featured realistic environmental simulators, advanced weapons ranges, and tactical planning rooms equipped with the latest intelligence on Krell biology and behavior. For 5 grueling days, James drove his small team to their physical and mental limits. They ran infiltration scenarios until they could move as silently as shadows. They practiced emergency extraction protocols until they could recite them in their sleep. They studied Krell behavior patterns until they could anticipate the insectoid reactions to various stimuli. And, perhaps most importantly, they learned to function as a cohesive unit despite their wildly different physiologies and cultural backgrounds. Trill'Ax, with their chameleonic skin and natural stealth abilities, took the lead on reconnaissance tactics. Kaleth, a stocky, silicon-based being with remarkable durability, became their defensive specialist. Vorr'Nak, whose forearms allowed for exceptional weapons handling, specialized in covering fire. Zenzi, a small but lightning-fast avian, mastered rapid response and extraction techniques. And Drel, a reptilian being with incredible sensory perception, became their early warning system against Krell patrols. On the 6th day, with less than 48 hours until deployment, James assembled his team in the tactical planning room for a final mission briefing. Outpost Sigma-7, he began, activating a holographic display of their target. A former mining facility on the third moon of Vega Prime, now serving as a Krell forward operating base. Intelligence suggests they're coordinating their next major offensive from this location. The hologram rotated, highlighting various structures across the lunar surface. Our primary objective is intelligence gathering, James continued. We need to access their central command node, located here. He indicated a large dome-like structure at the center of the complex. From there, we can extract data on their battle plans and potentially disrupt their communications network. Security assessment? Asked Vorr'Nak, his 4 hands moving in perfect synchronization as he made notes on his datapad. Heavy, James replied grimly. Approximately 200 Krell warriors, mostly drones, with at least a dozen command-class units coordinating their activities. Automated defense systems throughout the complex, and constant patrol patterns with minimal blind spots. Conventional infiltration would appear impossible, observed Kaleth, his gravelly voice reflecting his rocky physiology. Conventional, yes, James agreed, which is why we're taking an unconventional approach. He manipulated the hologram, zooming in on a narrow chasm several kilometers from the main complex. There's an abandoned maintenance tunnel here, dating back to the original mining operation. It's partially collapsed, which is why the Krell haven't secured it. But our scans indicate it's still passable. For beings of our size, perhaps, noted Drel, their forked tongue flicking out in a gesture of skepticism. But what of the Krell? They would detect our presence immediately in such confined spaces. That's where our edge comes in, James replied, activating another holographic display. This one showed a small cylindrical device. Prototype Krell pheromone disruptors. They emit a synthetic compound that interferes with the Krell's chemical communication methods. Within its radius, will register as background noise rather than intruders. Experimental technology, Zenzi chirped, her feathers ruffling with concern. Reliability? 87% effective in laboratory conditions, James admitted. Less in field tests, but it's the best option we have for getting close enough to access their systems. And once we have the intelligence? Asked Trill'Ax, their skin shifting through patterns of blue and green, focused calculation. Secondary objective is to plant these. James produced a small case containing what looked like metallic seeds, quantum destabilizers. Once activated, they'll create localized field disruptions that should knock out their communications array for approximately 72 hours. That would give the unified fleet time to position defensively before the Krell can launch their coordinated attack. And our extraction? Kaleth rumbled. Same way we came in, James replied. Once the destabilizers are planted, we'll have a 5-minute window before they activate. That should give us time to reach the maintenance tunnel and clear the blast radius. He looked around at his team, studying their expressions. Despite their alien features, he had learned to read them over the past weeks. They were nervous, as they should be, but determined. Ready. Any questions? He asked. Casualty projections? Vorr'Nak inquired, his voice carefully neutral. James appreciated the directness. 38% chance of at least one team member not returning, based on current intelligence. A heavy silence fell over the room. Better odds than the colonies will have if the Krell offensive proceeds unchallenged, Drel observed finally, their scales shifting color slightly. Resignation, perhaps. Exactly, James nodded. This mission isn't just about gathering intelligence. It's about saving lives, potentially millions of them. We understand the stakes, Instructor, Trill'Ax said, their skin glowing with a steady, determined blue. We are prepared. James looked at each team member in turn, seeing in their alien faces the same resolve he had seen in countless human soldiers before dangerous missions. Different species, different biologies, but the same courage. Then we deploy at 0600 tomorrow, he announced. Get some rest, check your gear one last time, and be ready. This isn't a simulation anymore. As the team dispersed, Admiral Zix Trell entered the room, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence as he surveyed the holographic displays. Your team appears well prepared, Captain Harper, he observed. As well as they can be, given the time frame, James replied, shutting down the holographic projector. But I still have concerns about sending cadets into this kind of operation. Understandable. The Admiral's skin darkened slightly. Concern, James had learned. But I have reviewed their training metrics. They have made remarkable progress under your instruction. Metrics don't tell the whole story, Admiral. Combat isn't just about numbers. So you have frequently reminded me, Zix Trell replied, with what might have been dry humor. Nevertheless, the Security Council has approved the mission parameters. The intelligence you gather could be critical to our defensive strategy. James nodded. We'll get it done. Just make sure the fleet is ready to move when we transmit the data. They will be, the Admiral assured him. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he added, There is one more matter, Captain Harper. What's that? The Security Council has authorized your permanent transfer to Special Operations Command should this mission prove successful. Your unique perspective on combat tactics has proven valuable. James raised an eyebrow. I thought I was too dangerous to be trusted in the field. Perspectives evolve, replied the Admiral simply. As do circumstances, the Krell threat has forced us to reconsider many long-held assumptions, including your distrust of human combat protocols. Let us say we have developed a greater appreciation for their effectiveness, the Admiral replied diplomatically. Your assignment here was originally conceived as a controlled experiment, a way to assess human military methods without fully embracing them. And now? Now we recognize that survival may require adaptation. Zixtral's 6 eyes fixed on James with unexpected intensity, even if that adaptation makes us uncomfortable. James considered this. You know, Admiral, humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. An apt observation. The Admiral's skin lightened slightly, though I would amend it to say that survival is the mother of evolution. Sometimes species must change to survive. Even if that change means becoming more like us violent humans? James asked pointedly. The Admiral's 6 eyes blinked in perfect sequence. Even then, Captain Harper, even then. The approach to Outpost Sigma-7 was eerily quiet. Their stealth shuttle, a marvel of unified forces technology with adaptive camouflage capabilities, slipped past the Krell's outer sensor grid without triggering any alarms. As they neared the abandoned maintenance tunnel, James felt the familiar tension that preceded combat, a mixture of heightened awareness and focused calm that he had experienced countless times before. His team, however, was experiencing it for the first time. Despite their intensive training, he could sense their anxiety as they prepared for insertion. Final equipment check, he ordered as the shuttle settled into a narrow ravine 2 kilometers from their entry point. Pheromone disruptors active and synchronized? Confirmed, replied Trill'Ax, checking the small device attached to their belt. Disruption field stable at 93% efficiency. Quantum destabilizers? Vorr'Nak held up the case containing the devices. Primed and ready, Captain. Communications? Subvocal transmitters tested and functional. Zenzi chirped, tapping the nearly invisible device at her throat. Encrypted channels secure. James nodded, satisfied. Remember the mission parameters. We move quickly, but cautiously. Stealth is our priority. Engage Krell only if absolutely necessary for mission completion or team survival. Questions? There were none. There. His team was ready, or as ready as they could be. Then let's move out. The journey to the maintenance tunnel was tense but uneventful. Trill'Ax took point, their chameleonic skin blending perfectly with the lunar landscape as they scanned for Krell patrols. Drel followed, their enhanced senses alert for any sign of detection. The others moved in practiced formation, maintaining optimal spacing and sightlines. When they reached the tunnel entrance, a partially collapsed opening barely large enough for Kaleth's bulky frame, James activated his tactical scanner. No Krell life signs within 50 meters, he reported quietly. Tunnel integrity appears stable, but watch for weak points. And remember, the pheromone disruptors have limited range. Stay close. One by one, they slipped into the darkness of the tunnel, activating low-intensity light sources that were outside the Krell's visual spectrum. The passage was narrow and claustrophobic, with fallen debris forcing them to crawl in several sections. The stale air carried metallic traces of the moon's original mining operations, mixed with an unfamiliar organic scent that James recognized as Krell pheromones. They've been through here, he whispered, indicating faint scratch marks on the tunnel walls. Not recently, but they've scouted it. Yet they did not secure it, observed Kaleth, his rocky skin scraping softly against the tunnel floor. Curious? Krell prioritize efficiency, Trill'Ax replied, their skin shifting to match the darker tunnel sections. This passage is too small for their larger warriors and too circuitous for their patrol patterns. Their mistake, James smiled grimly. And our advantage. They proceeded slowly, navigating the twisting passage as it delved deeper beneath the lunar surface. According to their intelligence, the tunnel should eventually connect with the outpost's lower maintenance level, providing access to the central command node. After nearly an hour of careful progress, Drel suddenly froze, their forked tongue flicking rapidly. Krell, They hissed. Ahead and moving in our direction. James signaled for the team to halt and take defensive positions. Numbers? 3, Drel replied, their eyes narrowing as they processed sensory information. Drone class, I believe, moving in standard patrol formation. Pheromone disruptors should mask our presence, James reminded them. Hold position and maintain silence. The tension was palpable as they waited, pressed against the tunnel walls. Despite the disruptors, discovery would mean immediate combat in extremely confined quarters, a scenario they had trained for but hoped to avoid. Minutes passed like hours until finally, Drel relaxed slightly. They've passed, continuing on their patrol route. Collectively, the team exhaled. Let's keep moving, James ordered. We're approaching the junction point. Another 20 minutes brought them to where the maintenance tunnel intersected with the outpost's lower level. A heavy metal hatch blocked their path, a relic of the original mining operation, now integrated into the Krell's security system. Electronic lock, Vorr'Nak observed, examining the control panel with his 4 hands. Krell design, but adapted from the existing human mining technology. Can you bypass it? James asked. Vorr'Nak's multiple limbs were already manipulating the panel's components. Yes, but it will take time. And there's a risk of triggering silent alarms. How much time? 7 minutes minimum. James considered their options. Do it. The rest of us will establish a defensive perimeter. If we're discovered, we'll need to hold this position long enough for you to complete the bypass. As Vorr'Nak worked on the lock, the others arranged themselves in optimal defensive positions around the junction. James checked his weapon, a modified Unified Forces pulse rifle that had been calibrated to his human physiology. It felt reassuringly familiar in his hands, a stark contrast to the alien environment surrounding them. Captain, Trill'Ax's voice came through his subvocal communicator. I've been monitoring Krell movement patterns through vibration analysis. There's increased activity in the upper levels. Could be routine, James replied, though his instincts suggested otherwise. Any sign they've detected us? No directed movement toward our position, Trill'Ax confirmed. But the pattern is unusual. Before James could respond, Vorr'Nak announced, bypass complete, hatch unlocking now. With a soft hiss, the heavy metal door slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor beyond. The architecture was a bizarre hybrid of human mining facility and Krell biological structures. Metal walls partially covered with a chitinous, resin-like substance that seemed to pulse subtly in the low light. Move, James ordered, and the team slipped through the hatch into the Krell outpost. The air inside was warmer and heavier, filled with the distinctive scent of Krell pheromones. Their disruptors appeared to be functioning, as they encountered no immediate response to their presence. According to their intelligence, the central command node was located 3 levels up, at the heart of the complex. They would need to navigate through the outpost's maze-like interior while avoiding Krell patrols and automated security systems. Trill'Ax, take point, James directed. Drel, maintain sensory sweep for Krell activity. Kaleth and Zenzi, guard our flanks. Vorr'Nak, watch our 6. I'll coordinate navigation. They moved with practiced precision, advancing through the twisted corridors of the converted mining facility. Twice they were forced to halt and conceal themselves as Krell patrols passed nearby. But the pheromone disruptors appeared to be working. The insectoid warriors showed no sign of detecting their presence. As they approached a central lift shaft that would take them to the upper levels, Drel suddenly tensed. Multiple Krell signatures converging, they warned, different from standard patrol patterns. They know we're here, James realized. Maybe not our exact location, but they've detected something. The lift will be monitored, Kaleth observed. We need an alternative route. James consulted his tactical display. There. He pointed to a narrow maintenance shaft. It's designed for drone access, but we should be able to use it to reach the upper levels. It will be tight for Kaleth, Zenzi noted, eyeing their bulky companion. I will manage, the silicon-based being assured them. They had just reached the maintenance shaft when the first alarm sounded, a pulsing organic wail that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. They've confirmed intruders, James announced, helping Kaleth squeeze into the narrow shaft. Our stealth advantage is compromised. We need to move faster. One by one, they climbed the maintenance shaft, emerging 2 levels up into a corridor that vibrated with alarm signals. The sound would be disorienting to most species, but James had trained his team to filter such distractions. Central command node is approximately 70 meters in that direction, he indicated, checking his tactical display. Expect heavy resistance. He wasn't wrong. As they approached the command center, they encountered their first Krell defenders, 4 drone-class warriors guarding an intersection. Take them out, James ordered. Quick and quiet. The team moved with synchronized precision. Trill'Ax disappeared into the shadows, reappearing behind one drone to deliver a silent, lethal strike to its neural cluster. Vorr'Nak's 4 arms manipulated his weapon with impossible speed, dispatching another drone before it could react. Zenzi's incredible velocity made her nearly invisible as she darted in to neutralize the third. And Kaleth simply grabbed the fourth, crushing its exoskeleton with his silicon strength. 4 kills in under 10 seconds. Silent. Efficient. Just as James had trained them. Move, he ordered, leading them past the fallen Krell toward the command center entrance. The door to the central command node was heavily secured. A massive, organic metallic hybrid barrier designed to withstand significant firepower. Vorr'Nak? James glanced at their technical specialist. This is different from the outer hatch, Vorr'Nak replied, examining the complex locking mechanism with all 4 hands. More sophisticated, more Krell. Can you bypass it? Yes, but it will take time, and the alarm is active. They know we're in the facility. James made a quick decision. New plan. We breach with explosives. Zenzi, prep a focused charge. Kaleth, be ready to lead the entry. As they prepared for the breach, Drel's head suddenly snapped up, their forked tongue flicking rapidly. Multiple Krell signatures approaching, they warned. At least 20, including larger variants. Command class. They're mobilizing their defenders, James nodded. Trill'Ax, Vorr'Nak, prepare to hold this position. Drel, continue monitoring their approach. Zenzi, charge ready? Placed and primed, the avian confirmed, stepping back from the door where she had attached a small, powerful explosive device. On my mark, James positioned himself beside Kaleth. 3, 2, 1, mark! The explosive detonated with a focused, directed blast that shattered the command center door. Kaleth charged through the opening, absorbing several energy blasts from the Krell defenders inside without slowing. James followed, weapon raised, picking off 2 Krell operators before they could react. The command center was a nightmarish blend of biological computing and mechanical interfaces. 7 Krell technicians manned various stations, while a larger, more ornate Krell, clearly a command class, directed their activities from a central platform. Kaleth engaged the command class Krell directly, his silicon body withstanding attacks that would have incapacitated any other team member. James and Zenzi systematically neutralized the technicians, clearing a path to the central data node. Vorr'Nak, we need you in here, James called over the comm. Data extraction priority. Defending the entrance, came the terse reply, accompanied by the sound of weapons fire. Krell reinforcements have arrived. Trill'Ax? We're holding, Captain, the chameleonic cadet replied, their voice strained but steady. But there are many of them. James made a split-second decision. Drel, take over for Vorr'Nak. Vorr'Nak, get in here and access that data node. We need that intelligence. As they executed the switch, Kaleth finally overpowered the command class Krell, crushing its reinforced exoskeleton with a sickening crack. The central platform was now clear, giving Vorr'Nak access to the biological computing interface. Interfacing now, the 4-armed technician reported, connecting specialized translation devices to the pulsing organic data nodes. Initial bypass successful, accessing Krell battle plans. Hurry, James urged, joining Trill'Ax and Drel at the entrance to help hold off the growing Krell counterattack. The narrow doorway created a bottleneck that worked to their advantage, but the Krell were pressing forward with increasing numbers and ferocity. Data extraction at 37%, Vorr'Nak reported. I've also located their communications array control, preparing quantum destabilizers for deployment. The firefight at the entrance intensified. A larger Krell variant, heavily armored and wielding some kind of organic plasma weapon, pushed to the front of the attacking force. Its first shot nearly took Drel's head off, missing by millimeters. Fall back to inner defense positions, James ordered, recognizing the escalating threat. Controlled withdrawal. Trill'Ax and Drel retreated deeper into the command center, taking up new positions that offered better cover. James remained at the doorway a moment longer, laying down suppressive fire to slow the Krell advance. Data extraction at 68%, Vorr'Nak called out. Quantum destabilizers primed and ready for activation. How much longer? James asked, ducking back as a plasma bolt melted part of the doorframe where his head had been a second earlier. 3 minutes for complete extraction, Vorr'Nak replied, his 4 hands working frantically across the alien interface. But I have the essential data now. Primary attack vectors, fleet compositions, deployment schedules. That's enough, James decided. Plant the destabilizers and prepare for extraction. We need to get this intelligence back to the unified forces. As Vorr'Nak placed the quantum destabilizers at key points around the command center, The Krell launched a coordinated push through the doorway. 3 drone-class warriors made it through before Kaleth intercepted them, his massive form creating a living barrier. Destabilizers placed, Vorr'Nak announced. 5-minute countdown initiated. Everyone out through the secondary exit, James ordered, indicating a maintenance hatch that their tactical analysis had identified on the far side of the command center. Kaleth, bring up the rear. Trill'Ax, take point again. As the team moved toward the exit, a devastating blast tore through the main doorway, throwing Kaleth across the room. The armored Krell commander stepped through the smoking opening, its organic plasma weapon already charging for another shot. Go! James shouted to his team, turning to face the Krell commander. He fired a sustained burst, but the energy bolts seemed to dissipate against the creature's armored carapace. The Krell commander fired again, the plasma bolt missing James by inches as he dove behind a console. The heat was so intense that he felt his skin blister even from the near miss. Captain, we need to move now, Zenzi called from the secondary exit, where the rest of the team was already beginning their extraction. Negative, James replied, calculating the timing in his head. That commander's weapon will cut you down in the tunnel. I'll hold it here. That is unacceptable, Kaleth rumbled, pushing himself back to his feet despite obvious damage to his silicon form. We leave together. Before James could argue, Kaleth charged the Krell commander with surprising speed for his size. The 2 massive beings collided in the center of the command room, grappling in a deadly contest of strength. The destabilizers will activate in 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Vorr'Nak reminded them urgently. We must clear the blast radius. James made a decision. Zenzi, Vorr'Nak, Drel, get that intelligence back to the unified forces. That's priority 1. Trill'Ax, you're with me. We're getting Kaleth out. The 3 team members hesitated only briefly before acknowledging the order. As they disappeared into the maintenance tunnel, James turned to Trill'Ax. I need a distraction, he explained quickly. Something to break their grapple so we can extract. Trill'Ax's skin shifted rapidly through patterns of blue and red. Calculation and determination. I can get behind the commander. My species' neural toxin might penetrate its armor at the joint sections. James nodded. Do it. I'll draw its attention. Stepping out from cover, James fired a carefully aimed shot at the Krell commander's compound eyes. The energy bolt didn't penetrate its armored head, but it was enough to draw the creature's attention away from Kaleth momentarily. In that instant, Trill'Ax seemed to vanish, their chameleonic skin perfectly matching the command center's background. Kaleth, understanding the plan without explanation, used the distraction to break the commander's grip and create separation. The Krell commander roared, a high, chittering sound that made James's teeth vibrate, and swung its massive weapon toward him. But before it could fire, its movements suddenly became erratic, its limbs twitching uncontrollably. Behind it, Trill'Ax became visible again, their specialized bioweapon, a natural secretion from their species, injected into the commander's armor joint. Now! James shouted, and all 3 of them bolted for the maintenance exit. They fled through the narrow tunnel as more Krell poured into the command center behind them. The countdown in James's tactical display showed less than 2 minutes until the quantum destabilizers activated. Faster, he urged as they navigated the twisting passage. Kaleth was struggling, his damaged form barely fitting through the tighter sections. Leave me, the silicon being rumbled. I am slowing our escape. Not happening, James replied firmly, helping to pull Kaleth through a particularly narrow section. We started together, we finished together. With Trill'Ax's help, they managed to drag Kaleth through the final stretch of the maintenance tunnel, emerging into a lower corridor, just as the tactical display hit the 1-minute mark. We need to reach the original maintenance shaft, James panted, orienting himself quickly. This way. They ran through the corridors, no longer concerned with stealth. Behind them, they could hear the chittering sounds of pursuing Krell. Ahead, they spotted Drel holding position at the entrance to the original mining tunnel. The others are already through, the reptilian reported as they approached. 30 seconds to destabilizer activation. Move, James ordered, practically shoving Trill'Ax into the tunnel. Kaleth, you're next. The silicon being squeezed into the opening, his damaged form moving painfully slowly. 20 seconds. Captain, Drel began, clearly intending to suggest that James go next. Not a chance. James cut them off. Get in there. Drel complied, slipping easily into the tunnel with their sleek form. 15 seconds. The first Krell rounded the corner just as James was entering the tunnel. He fired a suppressive burst, then pulled himself in as plasma bolts melted the rock around the entrance. 10 seconds. The tunnel seemed impossibly long as they scrambled through it, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the command center. James could feel the heat of plasma weapons behind him as the Krell fired blindly into the tunnel. 5 seconds. Brace! He shouted as his tactical display hit 0. The quantum destabilizers activated with a sound that wasn't so much heard as felt, a deep reality-warping pulse that caused the very atoms of the air to vibrate. The tunnel shook violently, rocks and debris raining down around them. For a terrifying moment, James thought the entire passage might collapse, burying them alive. But the tunnel held, though barely. Behind them, the pursuing Krell were not so fortunate, caught in the quantum disruption field that played havoc with their molecular structure. Keep moving, James urged, though the immediate danger of pursuit had passed. That was just the beginning. The field will expand and destabilize this entire section. They continued their desperate escape, finally emerging into the ravine where their shuttle waited. The rest of the team was already aboard, Zenzi at the controls with the engines primed for immediate departure. Go, go, go! James shouted as they stumbled aboard, the hatch barely sealing before Zenzi launched the shuttle into the lunar sky. Through the viewport, they watched as rippling waves of quantum distortion spread across. Our side